Hey, what is up, guys? This is Steven. Welcome to the Guilty as Charged podcast. Here to do a little video about Mike Vrabel's potential coaching staff. So Tyler and I decided to each kind of dedicate some time here over the last few days to make individual videos for the top candidates in terms of who they might be looking to hire and add to the coaching staff. I think the staff that you put together is such an underrated aspect of coaching. I think it's one of the reasons why Anthony Lynn's tenure started out so well, is because his coaching staff was really able to help him out. And then I think it's one of the reasons why Brandon Staley's tenure soured, because I think he did not put a staff together that helped him reach his own potential. So it's a super important aspect of coaching. You can't do everything by yourself. The best coaching staffs these days have upwards of 25 assistants. So who you hire matters, especially as for the coordinator positions. Those are obviously the ones that are going to kind of make or break your season, depending on specific play calls and schemes and things like that. So Tyler talked about 20 different candidates that are connected to Jim Harbaugh. I was planning to do the same thing for Mike Vrabel, but it just kind of got a little a little, what's the word I'm looking for? Meaningless, I guess. I mean, Mike Vrabel's been in the league for 20 years at this point, so there's so many people connected to him. So I ultimately just decided to really focus in on the cool connections and obviously the coordinator connections that I thought would be really impactful there. So Tyler and I are going to try and do some separate videos here and there. Give you guys a bit of a different flavor in terms of the videos we are putting out. So hopefully you enjoy them. I know we got a lot of positive feedback about Tyler's coach video. So hopefully we get some more positive feedback here. Just watched the Kansas City Chiefs unfortunately beat the Bills. I was trying to wear my Dalton Kincaid Cam Rising shirt today to get out some positive juju out there. So I know it's red, but it's for Dalton Kincaid. I was hoping it would would spread some positive vibes out there. Unfortunately, did not happen. All right, that being said, let's dive into Mr. Mike Vrabel's potential coaching staff. I think there's obviously a lot of smoke about Jim Harbaugh right now. I forget if it was Ian Rappaport or Tom Pelissero, but it sounds like Mike Vrabel kind of is the second dog in the clubhouse, if you want to call it that. Chargers will have interviewed him previously. As of recording this on Sunday night, they have not announced any second interviews, but Jeremy Fowler did report that was going to happen this week. Jim Harbaugh's decision is not likely to happen until at the end of the week. So the Chargers are going to have some time to solidify their GM candidacy, maybe hire a GM, and then do some second interviews. And hopefully Mike Vrabel is attached to that, and I think he will be. So some really fun connections here. Hopefully you guys enjoy it. Like Tyler, tried to keep it as much as direct connections to Mike Vrabel himself. He's done a great job in Tennessee of hiring outside of his direct connections, specifically with guys who have maybe worked under the Patriot tree or the Matt LaFleur tree. That's a tree that he's pulled from a few times. Matt LaFleur was obviously his first offensive coordinator in Tennessee. It was objectively a great hire before promoting Arthur Smith. Excuse me. So that's really the criteria here. For positions like offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator, you're really talking about promotions and a reasonable promotion at that. No lateral moves unless the coaching staff is likely moving on. Those are the criteria. All right, first and foremost was a really fun one for me. Shane Waldron, a potential offensive coordinator candidate for Mike Vrabel. The connection there is that Shane Waldron was in New England as a Patriots operations and scouting assistant from 2004 to 2008. So it's not necessarily a super strong tie, but they work together, presumably. And I just mentioned the Matt LaFleur tree. Matt LaFleur obviously comes from the Sean McVay tree. So schematically, this would make a lot of sense for Mike Vrabel as well. So there is a potential relationship. I don't know how much of a relationship, but they were in New England at the same time for 4 years, while Mike Vrabel was still playing for the Patriots. And Shane Waldron, the public consensus does not match what the numbers say. And every time I've watched the Seahawks games, I feel like I've been very impressed with the stuff that he has been doing. And it's not like he's had elite quarterback play. So I was curious to find out that he's actually was their best EPA per play and success rate rankings were this past season in Seattle. And things have not been like super positive regarding Shane Waldron's 2023 season. So over the course of his 3 seasons calling the plays for the Seattle Seahawks, when you accumulate those 3 seasons, the Seahawks ranked 10th in EPA per play and 13th in success rate. So this is a guy who's hovered around the top 10 with a quarterback situation that is less than ideal. I know Geno has outperformed his contract and earned a second contract, but it's not like he walked into a great situation with a solidified quarterback. You had the tail end of Russ's career, his first season, and then you get Geno this past season. You have some offensive line injuries, things like that. So the numbers are really optimistic. Shane Waldron is somebody that is getting interviews in Chicago as well as Las Vegas right now. If you can, if you do hire Mike Vrabel, this is where I would start. This is a guy who has an established track record as a offensive coordinator, somebody who has shown an ability to maximize quarterback talent, maximize a run game, and the schematics would really line up with Mike Vrabel as well. So I think this would be a really great fit. We'll see what happens, obviously, but in terms of offensive coordinator candidates, this is easily my top choice if Mike Vrabel is the coach. Shane Waldron, I think, is a very, very good offensive coordinator option for the Chargers if they go this direction. I think also Shane Waldron could potentially line up with like Jim Harbaugh and his philosophy. Like I think Shane Waldron's run game concepts are very, very diverse, and I think that could make some sense too, although there's no direct ties there. Okay, let's talk about Arthur Smith. This is obviously the big name that's going to be connected to Mike Vrabel, although Mike Vrabel is currently interviewing in Atlanta, which would be hilarious. Obviously, they would never allow him to come back as an offensive coordinator. Maybe Arthur Smith doesn't have any other option, though. It'd be kind of funny. The Vrabel connection is obvious. He was the Titans tight end coach in 2018 and the offensive coordinator in 2019 and 2020. That should say 2020, not 2021. He was obviously the Falcons coach in 2021. The noteworthy, obviously, he was fired from the Falcons, and we all know why he was fired and why the Falcons are looking for a new head coach right now. But I think it's important that we zoom out and really look at what Arthur Smith did as an offensive coordinator. This is one of the reasons why I was so interested in him as a potential head coaching candidate back in 2021, was that those 2 years of the Titans, when he was the Titans offensive coordinator, combined, they were 4th in EPA per play and 2nd in success rate. They were the consensus like top 5 most efficient offense in the league. And that was with Ryan Tannehill at quarterback. Obviously, Justin Herbert would be a much better situation than that. And yes, the Falcons numbers are not great. Over the 3 years when he was the head coach, you're talking about 26th in EPA per play and 21st in success rate. However, they were top 12 in both metrics in 2022 with Marcus Mariota. And Marcus Mariota was obviously even more limited than Ryan Tannehill. But, you look at a situation where Arthur Smith has a quarterback he trusts, has a, lesser role where he could work with a guy he trusts very clearly, obviously. By all accounts, Mike Vrabel and Arthur Smith are great friends, and that might be his choice, honestly, if everything comes together. So Arthur Smith would not be the head coach here. He would have a person to hold him accountable to all the stuff that we don't like about his tenure in Atlanta. And you look at what he did when he was with Mike Vrabel, and the offense was one of the best offenses in the league. They played in an AFC championship game together. They played in another division round. They won the division 3 times together. So I understand the concerns, but you're talking about a lesser role that he has already thrived in for multiple seasons with that relationship. I think you could do worse than having Arthur Smith and Mike Vrabel together again. And honestly, unless Vrabel gets hired by the Falcons, I think this probably does ultimately happen. So we'll see what we'll see where things go. There was obviously the report today that the Chargers blocked Kellen Moore from interviewing for the Bears. Kellen Moore, Mike Vrabel, maybe that's something that could work. We'll see. But Arthur Smith, I understand the concerns, but he was a great offensive coordinator. Some guys are just that. Some guys are just meant to be coordinators. So zoom out a little bit. That's all I'm saying. Another one here that could be potentially interesting is Charles London. He's currently the Titans quarterbacks coach and passing game coordinator. Obviously, the Vrabel connection. This season was his first season in Tennessee, but they were in Houston for 3 seasons: 2014, 2015, 2016, 2017. 4 seasons, excuse me. Where he was the running backs coach and run game coordinator, I believe. He was also the Falcons quarterbacks coach in 2022. He received some offensive coordinator interviews after last season and then ultimately decided to move over to a slight promotion to get back with Mike Vrabel. Reportedly, the Titans are rumored to want to keep some of the same previous staff around Will Levis. So we'll see what happens there with Tim Kelly and Charles London. But at the same time, Charles London has made most of his career coaching running backs and coaching the run game. I believe the move to quarterbacks coach was to help him kind of diversify his resume. But his experience is mostly in the run game. He played running back himself. So if he's not an offensive coordinator candidate, if the Titans decide to go in a completely new direction, you could talk about bringing Charles London over as a run game coordinator kind of deal. And I would be pretty cool with that as well. Another candidate for offensive coordinator. This is Jason Vrabel. No relation, obviously, different spelling. Currently the Packers wide receiver coach and pass game coordinator. No direct tie that I could find to Mike Vrabel, but this is the LaFleur adjacent connection. Jason Vrabel is presumably the next guy up in the LaFleur tree that he's kind of built up. And I think you look at his resume and maximizing this Packers wide receiver room, I at least would want to pick his brain and see like what's going on here because, Christian Watson is drafted to be the guy. He's not the guy. You're talking about Jaden Reed led them in receiving this year. Dontavian Wicks and Romeo Dobbs and all these guys. I would want to pick his brain at minimum. Maybe he's not ready to be, an offensive coordinator. He's only been the pass game coordinator tag for the 1 season. But there is interest around the league for Jason Vrabel. He's gotten offensive coordinator interview requests previously. He's probably going to get more this year. I can't remember off the top of my head if he has had some. But again, this is a guy who's shown definitely enough signs to merit an offensive coordinator interview coaching there. He's also coached running backs and quarterbacks previously. It's not just wide receivers. So he does have a diverse portfolio as well. Matt LaFleur, I think, has done a great job preparing guys to move on to other positions. And I think this is kind of the next one there. Justin Out, another former Matt LaFleur coaching tree guy. He was the offensive coordinator for the Denver Broncos under Nate Hackett, was fired with Nate Hackett. He did not call plays in Denver, but he was the Packers tight end coach from 2019 to 2021. He's currently serving as the Titans running backs and run game coordinator. So I found it interesting that, Mike Vrabel, one of the things I really like about just looking at the coaches he's hired and like the stories behind them, he's about helping them move up the chain. And so the run game coordinator was not something that was in Justin Allen's background previously. He was mostly a passing guy, tight ends guy. But that specific run game coordinator tag is a position that Mike Vrabel has kind of pegged as this is my next guy up in line. So it is something to keep in mind. Mike Vrabel obviously thought of him highly enough to bring him over in that specific role. I would need to know more. The Packers tight ends under him were not necessarily like super high end. Obviously had Robert Tonyan, kind of his development. But he wasn't there with this young group, with Tucker Kraft and Luke Musgrave. The Broncos obviously did not go super well. So this is kind of lower on my totem pole. But if this is kind of your worst case scenario, I think that's not a bad place to be in right now. Pass game coordinator Wes Welker, former Charger. This is an interesting one. He's mostly been an offensive assistant and a wide receivers coach in recent memory. Um, he decided to leave San Francisco and go to Miami with Mike McDaniel and do so without a promotion. So either his contract was up or he just loves Mike McDaniel and he could certainly be the next offensive coordinator once if Frank Smith leaves. But obviously, we all know who Wes Welker was as a player. I think there's no better way for you to have a diverse schematic background of being a former Patriot and then working in the Shanahan tree, which is what he's done working with the 49ers and the Dolphins. I would be very interested in him, at least as a passing game coordinator. As an offensive coordinator, might be a little bit of a stretch, but again, this is kind of a floor for you. And I think we've seen the wide receiver development in San Francisco, what he's done with Brandon Ayuk and Juwan Jennings and Kendrick Bourne and Miami with Jalen Waddle. Obviously, Tyreek Hill is Tyreek Hill, but you have these other guys who he's kind of helped develop. And I think you can look at that as a strong background. So he was with Mike Vrabel, obviously, as a Patriot. And then they worked together for one season in Houston in 2017. So I would imagine they have a good relationship. But he's definitely somebody I would be interested in as a pass game coordinator for Mike Vrabel. Another fun one. This is more of a quarterbacks coach. This is just I love JT Barrett in college. He was one of my favorite college quarterbacks to watch in recent memory. When he was a freshman, Mike Vrabel was the defensive line coach at Ohio State. He's still very, very young. He's only in his second season as a coach. But I think this would be a good potential like coach to groom for those future roles. Obviously, he's played in the NFL. He played in college at a really high level. Right now, he's the Lions' assistant quarterbacks coach. So very green, but it was very fun to find this one. I had to definitely mention it. All right, let's get to the defensive coordinator one. I think this would be my favorite potential DC option is Anthony Weaver. He's currently the Ravens assistant head coach / defensive line coach. The Vrabel connection is that he was the Texans defensive line coach from 2016 to 2020. Vrabel was there in 2016 and 2017 as the defensive coordinator. Anthony Weaver has interviewed for head coaching positions. He could very easily stay in Baltimore and be promoted to defensive coordinator with Mike Macdonald leaving. He could leave with Mike Macdonald to be Mike Macdonald's defensive coordinator. But that being said, I think pairing Anthony Weaver with Mike Vrabel is one hell of a defensive background because everything that the Titans do well is kind of maximized in Baltimore right now. And everybody's going to try to get a piece of that. I think, the Chargers could certainly hire Jim Harbaugh and get Jesse Minter in there. And I think that'd be a fantastic setup as well. But with Anthony Weaver's background in Houston and Baltimore and the relationship with Mike Vrabel, his leadership skills that's being promoted in Baltimore, this is a guy that I would be very, very interested in. We've talked a bit about him on the show previously, but I mean, you look at what the Ravens are doing with the defensive line right now, outside of Justin Madubuike, it's not like they have a ton of blue chip top 5 draft picks. I mean, the career arc of Kyle Van Noy and Jadeveon Clowney right now is pretty crazy when you think about it. So the player development, the schematic background, the relationship fit, this to me would be the number one DC option for Mike Vrabel, and I think it would be a fantastic pairing together. Next one, Terrell Williams. He's obviously currently with the Tennessee Titans coaching staff. He's the defensive line coach and associate head coach. He's been with Mike Vrabel essentially since 2018 as the defensive line coach, and he's kind of been promoted recently as the associate head coach. He's a defensive line specialist. He obviously has the Khalil Mack connection that we mentioned on the show previously. And Mike Vrabel has been kind of grooming him to be a future head coach. He's been running the preseason as a head coach for the last couple of preseasons. So Mike Vrabel obviously thinks very highly of him. This could certainly be the one similar in a similar vein as Arthur Smith. And I think this would be objectively probably a better hiring. But Terrell Williams, you look at his resume and the consistent play that he's gotten out of the Tennessee Titans defensive line group. But obviously you point to Jeffrey Simmons as kind of a blue chip player, but his work with Danico Autry, his work with Arden Key, his work with Harold Landry and everything that has gone on there. And I think even the games where Jeffrey Simmons has missed, the Tennessee Titans are not really like they fall off, obviously, but they're still playing at a high level. They play hard. They do a lot of great things in terms of stunts and games and blitzes and everything like that. And so I think this would be a guy I would be very interested in, not as much as Anthony Weaver, because I think Anthony Weaver's schematic background is probably elevated for me, but Terrell Williams is right there with him. Next one, John Butler. I mentioned the Bills and their defense. So John Butler is the Bills defensive backs coach as well as the pass game coordinator. This is his first season with the pass game coordinator tag. The Bills promoted him after the 2022 season to try and keep him in Buffalo. So they obviously think very highly of him. They didn't want to lose him and Leslie Frazier, who they obviously fired in the same offseason. So his player development is a little more dicey than some of the other ones that are on this list. But you watch the Buffalo Bills defense and you watch like the 6th and 7th round picks and what they're getting out of Dane Jackson and what they got out of Teron Johnson, who's become a star. And obviously, you know, the situation with having Tre'Davious White in and out of the lineup. I think the Bills secondary has always been consistent. Although the Kaiir Elam thing is a bit of a red flag for me because he was a first round pick who most people agreed was a very high ceiling prospect, and he can't even get on the field in Buffalo. So that would be something that would give me pause. I would want to ask him about. But for the most part, I think you have a sound defense. I think it's a defense that lacks a little creativity as opposed to the other guys, which is why he's a little bit lower down here. But he was in Houston with Mike Vrabel for 4 seasons as well. He was the Texans secondary coach back then. So this is a guy, maybe he does have the pass game coordinator tag. So Sean McDermott could potentially get some heat on him. Maybe they revamp the defense. But if he is retained in Buffalo, you'd have to make him the defensive coordinator to pry him away from Buffalo. Maybe a bit rich for me, but certainly worth discussing. The next one here is Chris Harris, not that one, the other Chris Harris, who is also a former Charger. He's the current Titans cornerbacks coach and pass game coordinator. So again, if the Titans decide to keep him or would want to keep him, you would have to elevate him to defensive coordinator. He is currently getting defensive coordinator interview requests, so we'll see how that goes. But he's been with the Titans for only this one season. Previously, he was with the Commanders for 3 seasons. Before that, he was the Chargers assistant defensive backs coach. He is a former NFL player as well, drafted by the Chicago Bears. So he does have that aspect to his game as well. And again, I think Mike Vrabel obviously thought highly enough of him to give him the pass game coordinator tag. The cornerback and safety play in Tennessee, not super high level. I would definitely be concerned there. However, if you look at the Commander secondary and what he was able to get out of Benjamin St. Juste, what he was able to get out of Kendall Fuller, certainly some better player development stories in Washington than in Tennessee. But Tennessee is not. They were in a rebuilding year. That could have been certainly an aspect of the talent fall off there. So somebody worth interviewing. But he is maybe a little green for defensive coordinator right now. Josh Boyer. I was surprised finding Josh Boyer's numbers and really where they were at. So he was the former Miami Dolphins defensive coordinator. He is not currently employed in the NFL. I don't know if he's doing college or high school or what. But the Dolphins fired him in favor of Vic Fangio. Hard to blame them. That being said, if you combine his 3 seasons as the Dolphins defensive coordinator, they ranked 11th and 12th in EPA per play and success rate over his 3 seasons. I thought that was very interesting. My image of the Dolphins defense over that time period, where it was Brian Flores, first year of Mike McDaniel's tenure, was that not that the Dolphins defense was a top 12 unit, but by EPA per play and success rate, they were. So he has the Patriots connections. He was in New England forever, 2006 to 2018, before Brian Flores took him to Miami. I think this is an interesting one. I think this is somebody who, in a more stable coaching situation, might be a better defensive coordinator candidate. Again, I think the fact that he didn't coach this year is maybe a little concerning. Some guys just need to take a year off, and I certainly get that. But I would be very curious in him. His numbers were definitely better than I expected. It certainly surprised me. You look at what he was able to get out of Xavier Howard and all those guys down in Miami, and obviously Christian Wilkins and everybody that was kind of the star players of the Dolphins defense now. I'd be very curious to interview him and pick his brain a little bit. And then the obvious one is Shane Bowen. This, again, similar surprise here. When I picture the Titans defense, I pictured like a very high-end defense. That's not really been the case in Tennessee. Over the course of his entire tenure, they ranked 20th and 14th in EPA per play and 14th in success rate. A lot of that is bogged down by this current or this previous most recent season, where they ranked 28th in EPA per play, and 25th in success rate. Again, they were rebuilding, stuff like that. But I would be a little hesitant. I would understand it. He was previously considered like a hot defensive coordinator guy, maybe a potential future head coach. So in a better circumstance, maybe you're able to get that coach back out of him, but it's not like he's coming off of his peak powers, so to speak. He's been with Vrabel forever, though. He was with him in Houston in 2016, 2017, coaching linebackers in Tennessee in 2018 and 2020, and then he's been the defensive coordinator since 2021 for the last 3 seasons. So certainly something that Mike Vrabel feels very comfortable with. He's been around him for a really long time. I would be a little skeptical of the recent season, though. And I get it. The rebuilding season certainly played an impact there. But things certainly fell off to a point where I would be a little uncomfortable just like moving him right into defensive coordinator. I would prefer these other guys that I mentioned previously. But if this is your floor for defensive coordinator, again, I think you feel really great about that. All right, that's the last one. So that's it. I probably talked for a lot longer than I thought I would. Typical. But hopefully you guys enjoy the show. This is obviously an exciting week for the Chargers. I expect a hire to be made at some point this week, whether it's GM or head coach. So let me know your thoughts here about the candidates I mentioned. If you have a favorite pairing or two, I think I would go, like I mentioned, Shane Waldron and Anthony Weaver. That would be a fantastic pairing. I would be super excited about that pairing with Mike Vrabel. If you have other guys that are connected to him that I did not mention, feel free and let me know. Appreciate you guys. As always, we are super close to 10,000 subscribers. So please go subscribe if you are not subscribed, and tell a friend. And we appreciate you guys. As always, Bolt up.